All right, let's get right into it. When we think about major engineering failures, we usually think of weakness, right? Not enough steel, not enough concrete. But the story we're diving into today is about a completely different kind of failure. It's the story of a massive, multi-million-dollar structure that wasn't weak at all. It was just, well, it was a little too responsive. This is how the spectacular collapse of one single bridge changed how we build pretty much everything.
You know, this quote right here, it's kind of haunting, but it gets to the absolute heart of our story. It describes a man-made structure that stopped fighting the forces of nature and actually started, well, cooperating with them. This quote just frames the problem so perfectly. This wasn't a simple battle of steel versus wind. It was a bizarre and terrifying partnership.
And this is the central mystery we have to unravel. On November 7th, 1940, the brand new Tacoma Narrows Bridge, this supposed marvel of modern engineering, literally ripped itself to shreds. And get this, it wasn't a hurricane or some monster storm that did it. It was a wind of just 42 miles per hour. So how on earth could that happen?
To really understand the why, we first have to witness the what. So let's take a look at the absolutely incredible events of that day. I mean, this was a failure so dramatic it was caught on film and just stunned the entire world.
You're not gonna believe how short this bridge's life was. It opens to the public on July 1st, 1940, and almost right away it starts this weird up and down bouncing. But for 4 months, it was kind of just an unnerving curiosity. Then, on the morning of November 7th, that gentle bounce turned into a violent, twisting agony. By 11 a.m., it was gone. Just 4 months, from a grand opening to a grand failure. Unbelievable.
Now, in a collapse this massive, you'd expect a lot of casualties, right? Well, miraculously, there were no human deaths. The only fatality was a Cocker Spaniel named Tubby, who was left behind in an abandoned car. An engineering professor who was actually there to study the bridge's motion tried to rescue him, but the poor dog was so terrified he bit the professor, who had to retreat. And the whole chaotic moment was captured on film, which is the main reason we can study this wild event in such vivid detail today.
Okay, so why? Why was this one bridge so prone to movement in the first place? To answer that, we gotta look at its design and the very specific choices that made it so elegant, so efficient, and ultimately so doomed. Yeah, this whole thing, it wasn't exactly a secret. The construction workers themselves had a nickname for it, Galloping Gertie. Why? Because it had this unique, rolling, wave-like motion even in a gentle breeze. It was famous for this from day one. People would literally drive out to the bridge just to experience the thrill of riding the waves, kind of like an amusement park.
Okay, so here's where it all went wrong, and it really boils down to one critical design choice. See, traditional suspension bridges use these deep, open trusses that look like a kind of lattice. This design was great because it allowed wind to pass right through. But Gertie's designer, a guy named Leon Moiseff, he wanted a sleeker, more elegant, and frankly cheaper design. So he used solid I-beam girders. The result was this thin, solid wall that, instead of letting wind pass through, caught it, like a giant, massive sail.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty science here. Because catching the wind was only part one of the problem. The real catastrophe was what the bridge decided to do with all that wind energy. This is where we get into the wild physics of the failure.
And this brings us right back to our main question. A 42-mile-per-hour wind. I mean, that's not extreme. A bridge made of steel and concrete should just laugh at that, right? The problem wasn't the wind's sheer power. It was its rhythm and how the bridge's unique shape responded to it. See, this wasn't an issue of strength. It was an issue of dynamics.
The scientific phenomenon that actually destroyed the bridge is called aeroelastic flutter. Now, that sounds super complicated, I know. But trust me, the basic idea is actually pretty simple. The wind pushes on the bridge, and that causes it to move. But then that very movement changes how the wind pushes on the bridge, which, you guessed it, causes it to move even more. It's a vicious, self-feeding cycle where the structure's own motion makes the wind's effect on it even stronger.
So here's how that death spiral happened, step by step. First, wind hitting that solid side of the deck created lift, just like you'd see on an airplane wing. This made one side of the road rise up. Second, the bridge twisted in response to that lift. But third, and this is the absolute kicker, that twist presented a new, steeper angle to the wind, which created even more lift. Each twist fed the next one, pumping more and more energy into the system with every single oscillation, until the steel and concrete just couldn't take it anymore. They just gave up.
You can imagine, the collapse was a complete bombshell for the engineering community.
But from all that rubble came one of the most important lessons in modern history, a lesson that completely reshaped how we design and build our world.
See, this quote just nails the huge shift in thinking that happened after this collapse. Before 1940, engineers mostly designed for static loads. How much weight can this hold? How much wind pressure can it withstand? Gertie taught them that big structures aren't just static objects, they are dynamic systems that move, vibrate, and interact with their environment. They behave.
And the legacy of this failure? Oh, it was immediate, and it was huge. Suddenly, aerodynamics wasn't just for airplanes, it was for bridges and skyscrapers too. From that moment on, wind tunnel testing became an absolutely non-negotiable standard for any major bridge project. Engineers stopped just calculating strength and started analyzing dynamic behavior, vibration, and those dangerous feedback loops. A whole new field of science was basically born from this one single disaster.
So what does all that look like today, in practice? Well, let's bring the story right back to where it all started, to the Tacoma Narrows, and see how the lessons from Gallop and Gertie are still holding up our world today.
Just look at the difference when they rebuilt the bridge. It's night and day. In 1950, they made some really specific, crucial changes. Those solid plate girders that caught the wind? Gone. Replaced with deep, stiffening open trusses to let the air through. They even added vents in the roadway itself. The new bridge was also way wider and heavier. And the result? Well, they nicknamed the new one Sturdy Gertie, and it's still carrying cars as we speak.
And what's really cool is that if you go to the Tacoma Narrows today, you won't just see one bridge, you'll see two. Sturdy Gertie from 1950 is still there, carrying westbound traffic, and right next to it is a modern parallel bridge that opened in 2007. And you better believe both of them were designed from the ground up using wind tunnel testing and dynamic analysis, the very principles that were so tragically ignored back in 1940.
So, when you boil it all down, the story of Gallop and Gertie is, well, it's a really humbling reminder, isn't it? That our understanding is never really complete. It forces us to ask a really important question. What are our modern blind spots? What are the complex, invisible forces we might be overlooking right now in the things we're building today? That is the enduring and kind of unsettling lesson of the bridge that danced itself to death.